I want to go over another claim that you can make where the employer has shown unfair conduct, excuse me, at the time of termination that has interfered with your ability to find new employment following termination. There was a case in Ontario in 2019 in which the employer alleged that the plaintiff had stolen property from it and persisted in this position all through the litigation. And the court found that this interfered with the plaintiff's ability to find other employment and gave additional damages because of his extended period of unemployment well beyond the notice period. And the understanding and the ratio of all this needs a little nerdy law stuff, so let me just give you a little summary. It's important to know this because a lot of lawyers with respect are missing this point. So there's a case in Supreme Court of Canada called Wallace versus United Grain Growers, and I think the actual date was, I can't remember the date. It was a long time ago. And that case determined that where there was unfair conduct at the time of termination, that the employee should be entitled to compensation for the unfair conduct. And in the Wallace case, there is an allegation made that he was terminated for cause, and it was unfounded and excessive, and I don't think the word fictitious was used, but in that direction. And the court then said, well, to compensate for the unfair conduct, we're going to give additional notice. Now, the Wallace case also had a second component to it that has been forgotten, and the second component is that if the allegations made by the employer adversely affected the employee's ability to find other employment, then this should be compensated even beyond the notice period. So that was the Wallace case. The next important case was a case called Honda and Keys. Now, Keys himself, when the litigation was going on, was medically disabled and unable to look for other employment. So that wasn't a factor in the Honda case. And basically what happened in the Supreme Court of Canada case in Honda is they determined, well, if there is unfair conduct at the time of termination, it doesn't make any sense to extend the notice period. Just because of that, we're going to give compensation for damages for injured feelings, or what became known as aggravated damages, where there's unfair conduct at the time of termination. But the court in Honda did not look to the second branch of Wallace because it didn't need to, because Keys was medically disabled. So following Honda, there's been several cases that have awarded additional damages beyond the notice period, not intended to compensate for injured feelings, but intended to compensate for the greater period of unemployment caused by the employer's unfair conduct at termination and following. And the case I mentioned, that was a case called Headley. I think it was against City of Toronto. And the court basically said what I mentioned earlier, that the employer made unfounded allegations of theft. It prevented the employee from finding other employment beyond the usual notice period, and the employee received additional compensation. The full details are in the link below. There's also a case called Downham versus Lennox, where basically the court came to the same conclusion. So be mindful of this, and if the employer has said something or done something unfair to you that has adversely affected your ability to find other employment beyond the notice period, you may have additional claims. So all this is just heads up.